Daniel Bryan and Rowan beat Kevin Owens and Mustafa Ali. Rowan pinned Ali, which led to the arrival of Vince McMahon for the show closing angle with the New Day. New Day came out. Big E was in serious mode, Big E and Xavier. But Big E said they're in no mood to listen to Vince. We do everything for you. We never complain, and still we get treated like crap. They said Kofi's been here 11 years. He deserves this. Vince disagreed and said nobody deserves anything. He said Kofi will be in the Hall of Fame one day, but not on his own. No, he'll be in as a member of the New Day. So basically like China going in as a member of DX. He said Daniel Bryan made a great point when he called Kofi a B-plus player. I love how 2019 Daniel Bryan is basically wrestling 2014 Daniel Bryan at WrestleMania this year. Big E, I have to say this about Big E. Big E was the real sleeper, I think, here in this segment with his work on the mic. I said last week, I think I made a comment, I'm not really sure, if they did do some kind of a big angle where he turned and maybe even Kofi wins the title, but then New Day sort of feuds. Could he handle it? We still don't know if he could carry like a full heel promo, but certainly on the microphone, when he's serious and he's not gyrating and doing all these weird things, he can carry himself on the microphone. I think he showed that here in this segment. Kofi said, look, I never complain about anything. I always bust my ass. I've missed out on family events. I've never once been trick-or-treating with my kids because I've always been on the road. And everybody said, aw. Vince McMahon said, fuck your feelings. No, he didn't say that. He was thinking it. But he said, look, I don't want any handouts. I just want you to tell me, what do I have to do to get a match with Daniel Bryan for the WWE title? And at that point, Randy Orton walked out on stage. Samoa Joe walked out on stage. The Bar walked out on stage. Rowan came out. And Vince said, well, all you got to do is run the gauntlet against all 5 of these men next week. And if you can beat them, then you're in. The impossible task. And that's how they went off the air. I have to thank Yvonne. And I really like that angle, by the way. But I have to thank Yvonne in the Facebook group for reminding me about a certain story. And I forgot about this, even though I read it, because I read Jericho's book. It's from Chris Jericho's second book. I think it was his second book. The Best in the World at What? I have no idea. Because Jericho, I think, did 4 books. It's one of the Jericho books that's actually on Audible, because not all of them are. So, cheap plug. This would be a good time to use our link and get the book for free. audibletrial.com/Solomonster. Since I forgot to plug it earlier, I'll plug it now. But in the book, Jericho tells a story about being on Vince McMahon's private plane a few weeks before WrestleMania 26. They're getting ready to go to a press conference for the show. Kofi Kingston was among those flying on the private jet that day to the press conference. And Jericho said everybody was shit-faced by the time they landed. Well, Jericho, I'm sure, was. Everybody was shit-faced by the time they landed. Probably got an empty bottle of Grey Goose rolling down the aisle. And when Kofi gets up to leave, Vince McMahon makes a comment to him to the effect of, maybe he'll get over one of these days. Jericho was pissed. Kofi no-sold it, got off the plane. Jericho was pissed. And he goes over to Kofi on the runway. He says, look, you got to get back on that plane right now and challenge him. You can't let that slide, because if you do, he'll walk all over you whenever he feels like it. You got to stand up to him. He wanted Kofi to stand up for himself. So Kofi marched back up onto the plane. Jericho followed. He wanted to watch. And Kofi says, Vince, do you have a problem with me? And Vince was kind of taken aback by the whole thing. And he said, maybe I do. You want to do something about it? And Kofi goes, do you want me to do something about it? And Vince goes, do you want to do something about it? This sounds like a scene out of an episode of Curb Your Enthusiasm. I have this image in my head of Vince staring down Kofi the way that Larry stares down people. So finally, Vince just double legs him. In mid-sentence, he's saying something and he double legs Kofi out of nowhere. The two of them are rolling around the aisle on the plane for a little bit before Vince just gets up, belly laughing. That's how you do it, he says, and then he gets off the plane. I just wanted to tell that story again, but it's the joke that Vince told that got me. Maybe you'll get over one of these days. And here we are, almost 10 years after he said that, and it would appear that Kofi has finally gotten himself over. The people always liked him. It was never like he was never, quote unquote over, whatever your definition of that word is. The people always liked him, and New Day was very, very popular for a while. I mean, they're still popular. I feel like they've cooled down a little bit, but he is over now at a level that he has never been before in his entire career. Now, can it last beyond WrestleMania? Can it last if and when they give the people the big payoff with him winning the championship? I can't say. I don't know. Maybe they're only in it for the ride, and when the ride is over, they won't care. Maybe people are just so wrapped up in the story that when the story ends, the reactions just aren't going to be there anymore. Or they're going to take a step back and go, wait a minute, Kofi Kingston is the WWE champion. And have a different reaction. There's just no way of knowing. I mean, surely if he loses, if he goes to WrestleMania and loses, if they Booker T him, like they did to Booker in 2003, then surely he will not be as over. I mean, Booker was okay. Booker ended up being okay and doing well for himself, in part because they moved him the fuck away from Triple H a few years later, and he won the world title on Smackdown. But he had already been a world champion. Booker was already a headline guy, even if he had been sort of pushed down the card a little bit. He had been world champion in WCW. He had been a world heavyweight champion in WWE. He wrestled guys like Stone Cold and The Rock. Kofi Kingston doesn't have that on his resume. Kofi Kingston has never been seen at that level. Booker was able to survive it. I don't know that Kofi survives a loss at WrestleMania. He's never been to the top, so this is a big test for him. The last gauntlet match where Kofi lasted an hour and fell short is really what got the fans behind him so strong in the first place. I expect him to win here in this gauntlet, but win or lose, I think this is going to be fantastic. I think it's smart for them to set up one last big roadblock for him to have to overcome to get to WrestleMania. And it puts the focus of the show on Tuesday this week squarely on Kofi Kingston. That show is now being built around him running the gauntlet. He's now working an angle with Vince McMahon. They wouldn't have just anybody out there working with Vince. That's a good sign. I'm optimistic about this in terms of his chances at WrestleMania. And I'm happy for him. I'm happy that he's getting this opportunity. It's a great story. New Day went from hosting WrestleMania 2 years ago to being involved in a major angle for the WWE Championship. With Vince McMahon heading into WrestleMania, I'd say that's a pretty big step up. And the gauntlet match on Tuesday is going to open the show. So if you're watching live, just be aware of that. It's going to be good. I'd be surprised if we don't see AJ Styles cost Randy Orton the match. Maybe it even comes down to Kofi and Orton, and AJ interferes and helps Kofi win, which wouldn't be a big deal. I mean, look, if it's just nonstop, constant interference throughout the entire gauntlet, Aleister Black and Ricochet attack the Bar, and, Rey Mysterio attacks Samoa Joe, and then it's kind of like, okay, kind of a cheap win for Kofi. But if Kofi can hang in there and find a way somehow to beat all these guys, but then he's kind of out of gas, and it looks like Orton's going to beat him, and AJ comes and saves the day, to me, that's fine. If Kofi's just wrestled 40, 50, 60 minutes and has a little assist at the end, not a big deal. I would expect that. But I'm looking forward to it. I'm pulling for him. I think it's going to be a great match. And no, like I said, I'm happy for him. Even though he once told me I looked like John Laurinaitis when I interviewed him, and that mortified me, I forgive him. I'm going to let bygones be bygones. Tom Phillips was on Busted Open Radio this week. He said that if Kofi gets the match, if he gets the match, kayfabe Tom, but if he gets the match against Daniel Bryan, he said he would like to see that match go on last and headline WrestleMania. Now, of course, he's going to say that because he's the SmackDown lead announcer. So he would get to call the main event of WrestleMania if that happened. You've heard me talk about the women the last few months and how there's no other match that makes sense to headline that show except Becky Lynch and Ronda Rousey. Now, of course, they've shoehorned Charlotte in there as well. And that really still, in a lot of ways, is the match getting the most, kind of the heaviest promotion going into WrestleMania. All that being equal, they've muddied this thing up so much. I'm less convinced now that match ought to go on last if Kofi is getting a WWE title match. I'm going to withhold judgment until we get closer to the show. It also depends on the finish. I mean, if we're being honest here, if Becky is winning and Kofi is not, then you close with the women. If Kofi is winning and Becky is not, then you close with the WWE title. If they're both winning, well, let's see how things play out the next couple of weeks. I'm kind of indifferent to the whole thing at this point. I'm at the point where I don't even care anymore. Like, they could put the fucking women's battle royal on last for all I care. It almost doesn't even matter to me. I'm so exhausted just thinking about this. And I didn't even mention Brock Lesnar and Seth Rollins. I wouldn't put it past them to put Brock on if Rollins is going to slay the beast and this is going to be his big crowning moment. They may put that match on last. It goes back to the question, are they going to give us 3 feel-good moments on this show? Brock losing, Kofi winning, and Becky winning. I would be kind of stunned if we get all 3. So it's like I said last week, pick your poison. What's the most important thing that you'd like to see on this WrestleMania show?